Hey guys, welcome. Well, I was going to say welcome back. I guess welcome period to the first podcast, live recording, whatever you want to call it, of Inside the Wave with myself, John Burrows, and Isaac Popper. Today we're going to be previewing the offense for Tulane's 2024 football team before the season starts. I guess we'll be able to look back at this eventually and see how accurate we were. I think given the inside information we're given, we probably will be pretty accurate. But we're going to do the offense and see how this goes. We're still working out the kinks a little bit of everything. This is our first attempt at this. It'll probably look a little different going forward, but we wanted to give y'all some content before the season starts. And before we start telling you about the team, we're going to tell you a little bit about ourselves, since this is our first episode of Inside the Wave, so that you know that we're qualified to be doing this. We're not just two random people, but also get to know us a little bit better, so we can have a good time. So Isaac, if you want to go ahead and start out, give the people a little bit on your background.
Awesome, John. Thank you. I can't wait to do this together. I've been looking forward to getting this first episode out, and here we are. It's been a great week attending practice with you and seeing the Green Wave roll. So I actually just graduated Tulane with finance and Jewish studies degrees, and I'm back as a graduate student in the Masters of Business Analytics program. There's a few Olympic sport athletes that are in my small program. It's just a cohort of 20 students. I got into Tulane in November 2019, and I'll be honest, that's when I became a fan of Tulane football. But ever since then, I have been a stout fan and been following the team closely starting with that Armed Forces Bowl in the winter of 2019. And then last year, I covered the Tulane team with the Uptown Update. I was the student insider and had weekly analytics segments on the Uptown Update podcast. Thank you to Jack and Reed for having me all the time last year and getting me on some off-season podcasts as well, breaking down the Tulane NFL draft prospects, having a basketball podcast before the FAU game to preview that, and so much more. It was a great experience last year covering the team. I was in the press box for the Military Bowl, live tweeting for that game, and am excited to be on the field this season with Fear the Wave. Off the field, if you will, I am the Tulane Sports Analytics Club president. John is the Tulane Sports Business Association president, so we have collaborated before, including with the Arizona State University NBA trade deadline competition, where we won as one of 30 teams, including mostly graduate students, with a team of all undergraduate students. And finally, I'm an ESPN Plus broadcast statistician for Tulane Athletics in the Tulane Video and Broadcasting department, where I'm a statistician on men's and women's basketball and do some camera work for Tulane volleyball. John, how about you?
Love it. Quite the resume you've accumulated. Like Isaac, I also go to Tulane. I'll be a senior this year. Definitely not ready to leave. Absolutely love it. But my involvement with Tulane athletics so far, my freshman year, I worked with the athletic department. I helped produce a lot of the content for the social media accounts that you saw for all sports, and then except for football, actually. So I got into football a little later here. I went to all the practices for Fear the Wave in the first semester, or not the first semester, I guess the second semester of last year. So I saw spring ball, saw spring camp. I write for Sports Illustrated. I cover Tulane for Sports Illustrated. I also help cover football at the University of Texas with On Texas Football. I work as a stat runner for the New Orleans Pelicans. And like Isaac mentioned, I am the president of Tulane Sports Business Association. So that's just a little bit about us. I'm sure I'm forgetting something. I'm sure Isaac's forgetting something. That's fine. But yeah, I guess we'll hop right into it now. So if you fast forwarded through that bit and you're just joining us now, welcome. Let's talk about the team. We could start with quarterbacks. I'll go for quarterbacks first, Isaac, if that's okay with you, and then you can start us off on receivers when we get there. So for quarterbacks, it was originally believed by a lot of Tulane fans that it was going to be a two-man race between Kyle Horton, returner from last year, and Ty Thompson, transfer from Oregon. But Darian Mensah started to insert himself in that conversation a little bit. Coach Summerall, still at the time of recording this, is yet to name a starter publicly, but Mensah has been taking most of the first team reps, so I'm going to go ahead and assume it's him. But that doesn't mean necessarily that it will be. It also doesn't mean it won't be going into week 2, or we don't know how long the leash will be for the starter once he names a starter. But my guess would be Mensah at this point, but I'm open to being wrong on that. Mensah's the youngest of the bunch, I believe, although none of them have much experience. But he seems to understand not the system, but the other two guys, and Coach Craddock, the offensive coordinator, talked about this a little bit. A lot of times, some of the guys seem to be trying to play hero ball in a sense, where they're trying to win the job all in one play. But Mensah seems to do a great job of just getting the ball to the amazing playmakers that Tulane has on this team. That's not just Micaiah Hughes. I'm excited to talk about receivers and tight end and everything too. But he seems to right now be the most effective at distributing the ball to the playmakers and then letting them do most of the work. Would you agree with that, Isaac? What have you seen so far?
I would agree. Mensah is the youngest as a redshirt freshman, and he probably has looked the best from what I've seen in practice, but we'll see what happens in week 1. We'll see what happens in week 2, and we'll see what happens the rest of the season. Darian Mensah, 6'3", 200, 0 career snaps, but obviously we think he looks great. What I like about him is that at the scrimmage, after he finishes a drive, he was going and fist bumping all of his teammates. That's something that Michael Pratt worked on with him. Michael Pratt was teaching him leadership qualities while starting at quarterback last season. And it's obviously impossible to follow up Michael Pratt. I last season called Michael Pratt the Tulane GOAT. I believe that Michael Pratt, statistically speaking, at least, is the best player to ever play at Tulane, at least in terms of performance. So there's high expectations for these 3 quarterbacks. Some people think that, there's 3 quarterbacks, no starter. I believe that we have 3 very capable starters, and whoever gets the job and whoever is inserted in any game will do a good job for this team. Ty Thompson, most of you probably know who Ty Thompson is. Number 2 dual threat quarterback out of high school, according to Rivals specifically. He spent 2 years as Bo Nix's backup. Bo Nix at Oregon, now playing for the Denver Broncos, and is going to be the first rookie starter in week 1 since John Elway over in Denver. His career stats are great, actually. He's 42 of 66 with 6 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. And last season specifically, he was 24 of 31 with 4 touchdowns and 1 interception. So although this is mostly garbage time, he still has been really good in the small sample that we've seen. He's also rushed 8 times for 48 yards, which is encouraging. John Summerall has called him the fastest player on the team, not just quarterback, and he throws really hard. I've been very impressed with his spirals in practice.
I want to say real quick, I don't know if 6 touchdowns to 4 interceptions is ideal, but 4-1 sounds a lot better the second season there.
Yeah, he looked great last season coming in off the bench under Bo Nix. And then Kai Horton, Tulane fans are definitely familiar with him. He was an iPop's top player, honorable mention last season. iPop's top players is something I did last season where I put my 6 best players. It was hard to put players like offensive linemen on there just because I was going off statistics. This was a statistics-based award. However, I was very much incorporating what I saw with my own eyes. But if I didn't have the stats to back it up, it was hard for me to be able to put certain position groups on there. However, after the season ended, I totaled up all the points, and I also made a season award list. So I gave out top players, 6 on the first team, 6 on the second team, third team, fourth team, and then honorable mention. So Kai Horn was my honorable mention. I'll mention some more awards for iPop's top players later on in the show. Kai Horton was in the portal, but he came back just right before New Year's. He has a career 50% completion rate, 6 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. The Military Bowl was a little bit shaky, but not bad. He was 13 for 20. He also had 24 rush yards and a touchdown, had a nice play to avoid a sack. The Military Bowl was pouring rain if you did not watch. So it's hard to put the blame on him. He also is mostly working with our backup wide receivers, scout team wide receivers in that game, as we were very banged up and had some opt-outs for that bowl game, unfortunately. He did fumble in that game, but had 0 interceptions in the Military Bowl and had a positive WPA, which is win probability added, a statistic that I will like to mention throughout the season. He helped the Tulane team win at Southern Miss last season. I saw him win down there. Was a good game manager. Also came in off the bench in 2022 to play Houston. Had a role in fighting against a top 4 Cincinnati team that went to the college football playoff in 2021 and kept us in the Ole Miss game, even though Tulane did not come out victorious. Darian Mensah in high school had a 69% completion rate and was 7-0 in conference play. So that's encouraging. Also a good student in the classroom with a 3.5 GPA. And one fun fact about him is that his twin sister actually plays at soccer at Oregon, where Ty Thompson transferred from.
Yeah, appreciate the fun fact there at the end. Also did not know Darian Mintz's GPA, so I don't know where you got that information. Well, yeah, he hasn't. Well, I guess no, he registered, so he's taking a year here. We'll go ask him what his GPA is here. He's a pretty smart guy. He's an architecture major, right? Is what he told us when we talked to him. Or that was that was Fat Watts told us he was.
Yeah, Fat Watts was an architect. He graduated.
He's also a super smart guy. Yes. Yeah. All right, let's move on to receivers. What do you want to talk about for the receivers, Isaac? It's a pretty loaded group.
It is a loaded group, and I talked about this on Twitter in the spring and on the Uptown Update. Tulane just lost their top 3 wide receivers, and they were productive. And I kind of think that this is Tulane's best wide receiving core of all time. I'm not the only one that thinks this, but they added so many players through the transfer portal that I'm just amazed getting their first 5-star, 4-star players through the portal, something that is new to college football in the last handful of years. And also being able to retain a lot of key players, specifically Yoel Keith Brown was one player that I thought was going to be very important to retain. And indeed, John Summerall, new head coach of the Tulane Green Wave, was able to do so. Dante Fleming we'll get to as well, another key player that was retained. Fat Watts brought back, Bryce Bohannon coming back, excuse me, as well. But I think in terms of transfers, at least in terms of week 1, we have to start with Mario Williams. So, John, what have you seen from Mario?
Just about everything. Mario, it's really early to say this, and so there's a kind of a comparison I'm thinking of, but I don't want to say it just yet because he hasn't played yet, so we'll come back to that later because it's a pretty big name. But if there's one thing you have to know about Mario Williams, there was one word to categorize Mario Williams, it would be explosive. He has struggled at times to consistently catch the ball, as you saw in the Cotton Bowl that Tulane won when he dropped the kickoff. But the thing about Mario Williams is once he gets the ball, he's one of the hardest players to tackle in the country. So he's definitely a guy that can make life easy on a quarterback. If you're under pressure, just check it down to Mario Williams, and before you know it, he could be 70 yards later celebrating in the end zone. He's also one of the leaders of the offense, even though he just got here. He's the guy after every play. If it's a good play for the offense, he's hyping up his guys. If it's a bad play, he's coaching up the rest of the team. So that's really what you want to see from a pretty young group that Tulane has at receivers in terms of play time. He comes from Lincoln Riley. He was with him at Oklahoma and then USC, as I'm sure a lot of y'all know. So, he's got experience. He's got experience at the Power 5 level. And he's just a really charismatic, talkative, explosive guy. 9 times out of 10, he's better than the guy who's lined up across from him. And 10 times out of 10, he's got to let him know that. So super fun guy to be around. It's going to be even more fun to watch.
Awesome. I've enjoyed watching him. So, John, you're now in Madrid, and today at practice, he returned a punt to the house, and boy, was that celebration fun. I hope that Tulane fans
I believe it.
in the Uptown kickoff on Thursday versus Southeastern Louisiana. Playing with Caleb Williams definitely makes a player better, as we know, the number 1 overall pick. And speaking of number 1, he was ESPN's number 1 wide receiver in 2021 high school recruiting. The talent is certainly not the question. With Mario, it'll just be making sure he doesn't make a mistake like he did in the Cotton Bowl with 4 minutes and 7 seconds left, muffing the kick return on the 1-yard line. We don't want to see that in a Tulane uniform. And he just got named to the Senior Bowl watch list, a very prestigious award watch list. So stay tuned, because in the next few days, we are going to be releasing a Senior Bowl watch list podcast interviewing all 6 of the players that got named to the watch list. I did say that we should start with Mario Williams, but it could very likely be Shaz Preston that is Tulane's number 1 wide receiver this year, John. I said that Mario Williams was the number 1 wide receiver in his high school class, according to ESPN, not necessarily all sites. But Shaz Preston was number 3, only behind Luther Burden, star player for Mizzou, and Evan Stewart at Texas A&M. He was also the number 2 player in Louisiana that year, only behind Will Campbell, an all SEC first-team offensive lineman for LSU as a second-year player. And he was a top 20 player, according to ESPN, in the entire nation. John, I know you like Shaz Preston. Tell us why.
I love Shaz Preston. Luther Burden's also a great name. I talked to him for a while at SEC Media Days. Great guy. Shaz Preston's that guy, though. Shaz Preston is likely going to miss week 1 with an injury, which is public. We're not breaking any news here. That's not the goal. We don't want to air out any injury information that's not public yet. So we did check that is public. We're going to target a week 2 return. So fans are going to have to hold off on the anticipation, which I'm excited for whenever he makes his debut, which will hopefully come week 2. But he's the thing about Shaz Preston is he's actually not that tall. He's like 5'11", 6 foot, but you wouldn't think that. When I first looked that up, I thought Google was wrong. It said like 6 foot. I was like, that's wrong. I got to go check the Tulane site. I checked. It said 6 foot. I was like, that can't be right. I got to go stand next to him. And I was like, oh, wow, because he doesn't play like it. He's not short at all. I mean, 6 foot's pretty tall, but I don't think I've ever seen a receiver at that height with that good of a jump ball ability. And it's not just jump balls. He's a good route runner. He gets behind the defense. Louisiana guy, you got to love it. He's my breakout player of the year, preseason breakout player of the year on offense. So I'm super excited for Shaz Preston to take the field at Yeoman whenever that may be. He's definitely gonna bring something that Tulane fans haven't seen before at the receiver position.
I love that prediction, John. Not only is he a Louisiana guy, but he is a St. James High School guy, which is less than 1 hour away from Tulane. Moving on to Yokeith Brown. He was a bright spot in the Military Bowl. He had 80 receiving yards, as well as in the American Athletic Conference Championship game. In both of those games, he was my number 2 iPop's top player. So it's not a perfect ranking, but once I pick my 6 players, I do put them in an order based on what I think was the top 6. But obviously, we had 6 great players that game. That's what matters more than actually necessarily ranking them to me. He was number 2 in both of those games, the 2 postseason games at the end of the year, only behind Devion Deal, who had some incredible forced fumbles and strip sacks at the end of the season, as well as in the beginning of the season. So it was very important to retain him. He was an iPop's top player, honorable mention for the season. Addicted to the claw machine at Dave & Buster's with Mario Williams. John Summerall was telling us about how the 2 of them were just going at it at Dave & Buster's, and he had to supposedly drag them out of Dave & Buster's because they would not stop playing the claw machine. Just shows you how competitive these guys are. Shaz Preston as well. Thankfully, he's off the crutches now. So, these 3 guys are super competitive. And he caught Michael Pratt's pass to to break the career passing yards record at Tulane, which was basically the final record Michael Pratt had to break in order to have every single record at Tulane. So that was monumental for me. Watch out for him on the jet sweeps. He had a pair of touchdowns early in the season in conference play on jet sweeps, and I believe that he will be used in that way again this season, as well as down the field. Dante Fleming, John, this is maybe the preseason standout as someone who has really elevated himself on the depth chart. He had a 39-yarder in the season opener and then had only one catch in conference play. And now, after just one catch in conference play, while being healthy, he's on the Senior Bowl watch list. We'll be interviewing him on the Senior Bowl pod. John, how is that possible?
He's had impressive training camps before, and then not burst onto the scene as much as he would have liked. So I'll tell you what he would tell you himself is you got to see it on Saturdays when we get here. But I'm optimistic. He's had as good a spring as anybody's had. He was a guy that I wasn't necessarily going to pay attention to as much going into spring practices and or fall camp, and he made it my job to have to because. He's a capable deep threat. That's what he is. He's a guy that will get behind the defense, and he's had an impressive spring. So, I don't know what playing time necessarily is going to be like this season with such a loaded receiver room, but injuries do happen, knock on wood. And apart from that, he also has probably played himself into a role. So, shout out to Dante Fleming. You love to see it.
Awesome. So there's your top 4 wide receivers. I'll round out the rest of the depth chart because this is, I'm calling it, the deepest wide receiver room in Tulane history. Bryce Bohannon returning for another year with the Wave, a short 5'10" wide receiver. He was also an iPop's top player honorable mention, partly for doing a good job in his 3 starts last season. Fat Watts had 35 catches between 2020 and 2021, played 12 games in each of those 2 seasons. Then he withdrew from the portal last winter after having 7+ offers, and now he's back with the Tulane squad. He had a 49-yard touchdown that some may remember if they stuck it out at the 2021 homecoming game. There weren't many people with me, unfortunately, that stuck it out till the end of that Tulsa game, but he had a huge 50-yard touchdown in that game and hopefully has some big plays for the Wave this year. He actually played JUCO with Nick Anderson and his brother, Deuce Watts, before joining the Wave. So 3 great players that played together. His brother now in the NFL Wave. Sidney Mabanaser, a player that I saw playing with the Ones today. He's scary. 6'5", wide receiver, played tight end in high school. Came over on May 7th. He transferred, though, a spring transfer. We had Therese Trainer and Jalen Griffin leave the wide receiver room, as well as Hunter Summers and Speedy Rogers. But Mabanaser and Kai Prehan came in to Wave, and I think that these 2 players have plenty of eligibility and could be great for the Tulane team this year. But Bannister has 3 years of eligibility, and Prehan's a redshirt freshman, so that gives him 4 years of eligibility. Prehan transferred over from LSU. He didn't play a single snap last year, but he got to learn under Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas, 2 of the best wide receivers in LSU history. And he actually is also a St. James High School alum, playing with Shaz Preston, just an hour away from him in high school. Consensus 4-star, something that we have not seen until Mario Williams and Shaz Preston. And it wasn't just LSU that offered him. He was a very high 4-star recruit. He had offers from Florida State, Michigan, Colorado, Michigan State, Kansas State, who will play as the first FBS opponent this year. You name it. Sean Nicholas, John. I know this is another wide receiver that you're excited about, even though he hasn't been taking as many snaps as with the Ones. Why is that?
Yeah. You see, I had to sit up there a little bit before I talk about Sean Nicholas. You mentioned those 4 receivers that transferred. Sean Nicholas is a lot of the reason why he was stealing reps from older, more experienced players at a time in his life where he should have still been taking high school classes. You mentioned it's one of the deepest receiver rooms that I would say that we've ever had in Tulane history. Whether it's the best or not, they have to hit the field first. But it's definitely capable of being. I would bet that it will be. So I don't know what his role will look like. He might redshirt similar to what Chris Brazzell did. He also might not. So that's my if Shaz Preston's my breakout player on the offense of the year, Sean Nicholas is my breakout player of the future. That's a guy who I genuinely believe, from what I've seen so far, is going to be playing on Sundays one day. And he's a true freshman, and I already believe that. And it's not something that I say lightly. I think he's like 6'4" also. So, and he's got to get a little more control of that giant frame. But man, he's a monster. He's a monster. I'm excited about him. I think we should, before this gets too long, I think we should move on and do. So we still have offensive line, tight ends, and running backs. Definitely stay tuned for running backs, because it's not just going to be Mekhi Hughes, but also we've got some interesting news about Mekhi Hughes that you're going to want to hear. Isaac, before we jump into the tight end position real quick, you want to tell people about that hat you're wearing?
This is a Fear the Wave bucket hat. There's going to be a ton of Fear the Wave merchandise sold by Campus Shop very, very soon. So be on the lookout for at FTW Collective announcements.
Yeah, you can probably get some of it. Campus Connections. Check it out there. It's also the design that I just got on the hat. We're not going to be doing that one anymore. We're going to have a bunch of brand new designs. It's already all designed, ordered. So we're excited for that. That'll be cool. I don't know. Isaac mentioned I'm in Madrid. I'm studying abroad. I just got here. I'm still going to be in communication with the players, the staff, everything, watching all the games. But I don't know how I'm going. I need to make sure I get a hold of some of it while I'm in Madrid so I can wear it. I'll have to maybe pay a little bit extra to get that shipped internationally, but it'll be well worth it with the excellent look and quality of this merch. Isaac, tell us about the tight end position.
Yeah, definitely starts with Alex Bauman here. Number 87, baby Gronk, IPOP's top player on fourth team last season, and most notably had the catch heard around the world, as I called it, in the Cotton Bowl.
Amen.
Alex Bauman looks not only stronger, but also faster. He put on a lot of muscle this offseason. I'm really impressed. The 6'5" target had the second most catches on the team besides Chris Brazzell last year, one of the three main wide receivers that left, along with Jaquan Jackson, who got drafted by the Titans, and Lawrence Keys III, who's now on an NFL team. And he was tied with Chris Brazzell for the second most receiving touchdowns on the team last year, only behind Lawrence Keys. Tight end 2 is certainly up for grabs. Chris Carter needs to be replaced. He was one of the best blocking tight ends in college football, according to Pro Football Focus. One possible replacement who was taking reps with the ones, a lot of them today in 11v11s, was Anthony Miller, 6'5", 265. When we're talking about a monster, I think of Anthony Miller. He also came in similar to Mabanaser on May 8th, just a day after him, transferred from Indiana, was an ESPN top 20 tight end in 2023, if we're going to keep continuing on with the ESPN rankings. And his offers included Memphis, which would be fun if he does well against them, and was an USF decommit. We play them at the end of September. Reggie Miller is returning. He was your tight end 3, last season. 6'3", 245, big frame, another great blocker, in addition to Chris Carter from last season. He played 12 games in 2022, including one start and had a touchdown versus UCF. Last season, he played all 14 games, and he was one of just 4 offensive players to play every single game last season. The only others being Yokeith Brown, Reggie Brown, Alex Bauman, Mekhi Hughes, and Shedro Lewis. So very impressive that Brown was there every week to block, and a big part of how Tulane had a successful offense, including for Mekhi Hughes. Other possible tight end 2s could be Josh Goins, Blake Gunter, or John Kahn.
Yeah, we got some depth. We got some depth at a lot of positions. Another place that I think Tulane's going to be extremely good at this year is the offensive line. I don't want this to run too long, so let's just go with the starting 5 right now, which I think will be the best in Group of 5 football. Isaac, if you want to give everyone from left to right the starting offensive line for the season, what they should expect, and just give us your thoughts.
It's a comparable offensive line to 2023, John. You bring back 3 starters, including Shadre Hurst, who started 10 games last season, even though he wasn't really a starter. And it actually is the most experienced offensive line in the entire group of 5. It has
Wow.
143 career starts as a position group. At left tackle, we've got Derek Graham, the Troy transfer. He went over to A&M in the winter and then came over to Tulane later in the spring. John Summerall had put out a PSA on February 7th, and I had tweeted that Summerall was putting out a PSA when he announced at the press conference that he needed a left tackle. At that point, Derek Graham was over at A&M, but Derek Graham re-entered the portal a little bit later, and John Summerall was able to bring his guy in. Scratch what I said about Anthony Miller being a monster. It's Derek Graham. Holy smokes, would I not want to be a defensive lineman matched up against Derek Graham? Oh my goodness, he makes every other offensive lineman on Tulane look tiny, including Rashad Green, who's massive. So Derek Graham at left tackle, left guard Shadre Hurst, one of my favorites from last season on the Uptown Update. Didn't allow a single sack. Center Vincent Vinny Murphy, who represented the offense at American Conference Media Day.
Did a great job.
Transfer from Western Kentucky. I think he'll be a fun one. And speaking of 0 sacks, he's lit up 0 sacks in his entire career. Forget just 1 year for Shadre Hurst. I'm sorry about Shadre Hurst, but step aside for Vinny Murphy. Josh Remitich coming back at right guard and Rashad Green at right tackle, a very familiar set of offensive linemen. For Tulane, they graduated with me in May, and they were both on the IPOP's top players teams, 3rd team for Rashad Green, 4th team for Josh Remitich. Remitich was hurt for a lot of last season, which made Shadre Hurst step in for him. Shadre Hurst stepped in for him 4 times at right guard and then started 6 games at the left guard position. Trey Tuggle would be the first offensive lineman to come in if needed this season, but he's going to be out for the year, unfortunately. He had a season-ending knee injury. He started 8 games in 2020, so that's part of the reason why this team is so experienced. Caleb Thomas started games in 2020 in Michael Pratt's first season. He's a backup center. He's a 6-year player along with Ethan Hudak. And then Landry Cannon and Gabe Fortson are other names to watch. Fortson injured at the moment, backup center, could play guard. And Landry Cannon could play a few different positions for Tulane this season, if needed, hopefully not. Running back, John, tell us about Mekhi Hughes. What is new about Mekhi Hughes this season?
Well, I don't think I'm going to make any headlines with this statement, but Mekhi Hughes is going to be the starter for Tulane.
Really?
Obviously, he won. Yeah, I know. Shocking. The returning conference rookie of the year is gonna keep his job. So that's not going to make any headlines. I know you're going to get a little bit more into the depth chart at running back and what we'll see behind Mekhi Hughes because it's impossible to just use one running back for a whole season. So you're going to see other guys. But what I noticed about Mekhi Hughes from the spring, and I talked with him about this after the spring practices, so this is straight from Mekhi Hughes. I told you about this too, Isaac, and you didn't believe me until you saw it in person, and so you're a believer now too, is Mekhi Hughes was a monster last year. He got caught a bit from behind every once in a while. I don't think it's going to be the case anymore. Mekhi Hughes has maintained all of his weight and strength, and he is a lot faster. He has added significant speed. He's also improved. That's probably what people are going to care about more as viewers, but just as important, he's improved as a pass blocker too. So you're going to see a equally strong Mekhi Hughes that is faster and much better as a pass blocker, which is going to be big. Pass blocking is what keeps you on the field as a running back. Pass blocking and ball security are the 2 big things that'll give you an NFL career. Tell us what we got behind Mekhi Hughes before we sign off.
Hard to believe that Mekhi Hughes was a 4th or 5th stringer and virtual unknown heading into the season opener versus USA last year. Well, this year, Tulane's got a lot of great depth at running back. Shotty Clayton Johnson returns. Probably see him as your 3rd down running back. Although Mekhi Hughes has been used in more receiving options this summer and fall camp than I saw last season. So Mekhi Hughes will probably play a lot of 3rd downs, but also Shotty Clayton Johnson returns. He only had 4.2 yards per carry last year, but he had 5.6 in 2022 in a larger sample. People thought that he was going to be the starting running back. And in fact, he did start the season opener last year before Mekhi Hughes took over. Due to Barnes' returns, he was a young player last year as a true freshman. Huge senior year with 22 touchdowns, 1,700 yards at Booker T. Washington High School in New Orleans, and broke off a 65-yard run last season. And then RB4 this year, at least to start, is a player that I'm really excited about.
It's your guy.
Ari McClure, number 25. Keep an eye out for that number. He was a top 100 running back in the country and a decommit from South Alabama, who we played in the season opener last year.
Smoked him.
He has the biggest calves of the entire position group and runs a 4.44 40-yard dash. Also is being used out wide with the ones in fall camp. And then Trey Cornist also will be in the mix. He's taken all 5 of these guys have taken reps with the ones. Cornist, another huge high school senior season. And by the way, Jamari McClure Tulane was one of the first schools that offered him. And John Sumrall was recruiting him pretty hard over at Troy, and then decommitted from USA, actually not that recently, but then was able to commit to Tulane in the spring.
Yeah, that's your guy at 25. Is I guess my Sean Nicholas. That's your version of Sean Nicholas. So the stars of the future are on the roster now. It's interesting you talk about how Mekhi Hughes wasn't really well known going into last season. But that's why you tune into Inside the Wave, so that you can know who those guys are before the season starts, just like we've been telling you. That way you can tell your friends and you can be right. That's what sports is all about, being right. Of course, not actually. But I've enjoyed my time here this evening. I guess it's evening for you. As we said, I'm in Madrid, so it's about midnight where I am. I got to get going to bed here. So I gotta unjet lag myself still. But I appreciate talking with you, Isaac, and make sure to check out, if you haven't watched it already, the tour of the brand new locker room with Fat Watts. Donate to Fear the Wave Collective. Like, subscribe. Any money that's generated by this YouTube from ad revenue will go immediately back into the players' pockets through NIL deals. So if you want to support Tulane athletics, and you want to support the guys who make it happen on Saturdays, definitely stay tuned with us. Isaac, you got anything you want to sign off with?
No, this is so exciting, John. Something brand new to Tulane, covering the team in a new way. I'm excited to preview the defense with you in the next episode, and I hope fans enjoy this podcast as well as our locker room tour of Fat Watts. We also have a special interview that will be released sometime soon, probably after the season opener. So just stay tuned to the channel. You might like what you see.
Yeah, it's going to be a surprise guest that you're going to see a lot of this year. Also previewing the defense with us is going to be Bailey Slim, the Tulane starting safety, one of the captains of the defense. I don't know if they've actually picked captains yet, but he's definitely one of the leaders. So make sure you check that out. Slim's going to be a great guest. I'm excited to record that episode with him too. So appreciate y'all watching. We'll see you in the next one. Roll Wave.
Roll Wave.